Thank you, Scott. That was really well spoken.
And sopranos, they hit those notes, did they not? Yes. High notes. And you were mean to them, that's why they did it. Good job, then. Don't touch my door. I was at a 50th wedding anniversary last night. Person shall remain nameless, you don't know. He'd been in Vietnam and then got sprayed with Agent Orange and was in a helicopter crash and came down and recuperating and all of that. And they basically blind. The only way he knows me, interestingly enough, is by touch and sound of voice. So I have to keep my timbre about the same, and then he has to come up and touch my shoulder and my neck and my face. And then he knows who I am. And then we start talking. And I said, I'm really shocked you stayed married for 50 years. Well, I was. Because he was really miserable for a part of that time. Now the thing is, I'm telling you, he knows he was miserable. And he makes no bones about it. And you know why he was miserable? Because he never told the truth in the early years of their marriage when he came home from Vietnam. He lived a lie, as so many of our vets tend to do. Because, of course, war, disruption of life, and doing things which are basically against our humanity and our spiritual values leaves a scar and messes your head and your brain. But what we're looking for are only heroes who can just be like John Wayne, right? Shoot 8 or 10 people, see 9 or 10 people dead and bleeding all over the place, get up and walk off into the sunset feeling good about themselves. Well, I hate to tell you people, life doesn't work like that. There's not a soul that you know who has ever been involved in a violent situation of any kind, including being abused at home, or in a fight at school, which has gotten ugly, or seen it on Facebook where they have those stupid setup fights. Very common. Every event of violence leaves a scar. Period. Cut and dry. And it replays over and over and over. And the only way it begins to diminish is the more you talk about it and process it. What is it? And the process is always the same. Because you come back to the essential question, which is what Jesus was observing to the disciples about that widow who put in a couple pennies. What makes for a fully functioning human being? It's your humanity. And it is the recognition of everybody else who is around you who is also part of the commonality of humanity. What that does for you as a follower of Jesus is to diminish the possibility that you are a labeler of other people as the other. You are less likely to label the other as enemy. You are less likely to label the other as unworthy. You're less likely to label when you cross the Interborough Bridge and you see that person who's carrying their sleeping bag and their junk with them in the bag. Just keep in mind, it's us who likely gave them the sleeping bag, just so you know. And that makes it less likely for you to be able competently to label them as the other. And they created their own problems, and it's their own darn fault anyhow. You see how convenient that is? It is so easy and convenient to blame the other whom you don't know as the problem. And in staying distant and stranger and alien to the other, you can continue to live your lives. And that is precisely why my friend, a 50-year marriage, has a good and healthy marriage. because he decided no longer to live a lie. He was scarred, and he told the story of his scarring numerous times. And little by little begins to pick up the essential goodness of his humanity and learns to live with that. And that is what Jesus points out to the disciples and to the scribes. Now, what was the thing with the scribes? I mean, those were not bad guys. They were the hot shots of the corporate world. But as for the corporate world in their day, they had all the money, they had all the education, they were the lawyers, they were the scholars, they had it all. They had everything. And what they were doing was very simply devouring, as Jesus said, devouring widows. I'm not sure how you devour a widow, except you can all figure out how to devour anybody. It's not hard when it comes to money. If you know money, you can devour pretty much anybody. We have a person that we've been asked to help to rebuild their house. This is from Hurricane Sandy still. Because the insurance company devoured them. Oh, it's in the fine print. And then you have to read all the fine print. And they thought they had read all the fine print. Silly them. Silly, silly them. They didn't. They read the fine print about the tree that fell on their house, that was an act of God. But they also read the fine print that said that they would remove the tree. But then there was more fine print that said, oh, by the way, if water gets into your house, we took the tree off, that's our responsibility. And if there's water that gets into your house and mold gets all into your house, well, that's not our issue. Well, it's in the fine print, and it's legal. Scribes devour people. And that's the point that Jesus is making, that you can count on the fact, as a fully functioning human being, that you are always going to meet evil in the face of another who treats you as the other, and not as a fellow human being, a traveler through life. And so that is why he always, Jesus did, was in the midst of people getting to know them, which is precisely what our calling is too, is to not only get to know each other, but to get to know as many people as we possibly can in a new way, so that we can never use the labels that politicians and news outlets use on others. By the way, what are your respective labels? You know, I always love when the outlets, the news outlets, try to talk about religion, because they're really pretty ignorant about it. Okay? Just so you know, without knowing you, just because you're the other for the moment, you're either a evangelical right wing, or you're a really ultra-conservative right wing evangelical, or you're a liberal Christian, or a progressive Christian. And you know what? I would defy any one of you to try to define one of those terms to me, that I couldn't pick it apart for you. But the beauty is, nobody knows you, so they can label you. And you become other than who you truly are. A complex, thoughtful, wise follower of Jesus, who within the context of your life has to make some difficult personal decisions in relation not only to your own life, but into the lives of the people who surround your life. That's complex, and it is not easy, and it is not simple. And yet in our contemporary society, we do look for simplicity and ease. I was trying to think of a soundbite for today's sermon, and I just can't come up with one. So, sorry. You'll have to go on TV and maybe come up with something better. But as Jesus was talking about the widow, basically what he was suggesting was this following thing. What did she have that the scribes did not? She had a basic, essential trust in the goodness of God. That despite appearances, despite her lifestyle of poverty, despite her life of being looked down upon as a lesser human being by the educated people and the moneyed people, she had a trust and a faith that God loved her and would find a way to care for her. Now, here's the basics. What is plan A for God's care of those who need care? You. There is no plan B. That's really tough because it really puts a lot of pressure on us, no? It does. And that's why you have so many people, as Scott was talking about teamwork, that's why you have so many people in our culture who have absented themselves from the community of the teamwork of the church, because all of a sudden it puts you in a different way of looking at life. You become an answer to a prayer for one who trusts that God will provide and care. Now that's putting the screws to us. And that's precisely the point that Jesus was making in the hearing of the scribes. And that's one of the reasons they wanted him dead, and did so successfully for 3 days. But that was the other thing. It was only a temporary stop, not a permanent stop. But the promise that is made to us is very simply that Jesus was the best working example for us as a person of what it means to be a fully functioning human being. All right? He did not have any idols he worshiped, okay? He did not worship his work. He did not worship whatever romance he may or may not have had. He did not worship his friends. He did not worship his free time. He did not worship his money. He did not worship food. All of the things that we tend to, which are really wonderfully great gifts from God, all wonderful gifts. Sin occurs at the occasion when it becomes your primary motive for being alive. That's called idolatry. And that's the one thing that you can say that Jesus never did. He was a fully functioning human being, same as you and I can be, so long as we don't create our own idols. So long as you can never say that the whole value and purpose of my life is to work and make money. When you do that, you're going to become nervous and jerky all the time, overtired, stressed out, greedy, worried about the people next to you, if they're going to get the advancement in salaries and all of that kind of stuff. And so you're going to have an idol that you're worshiping. I was just talking to a young man whose girlfriend broke up with him. And he was desperately in love. Desperately in love. I know, the heart throbs. I remember the days of broken hearts. Yes. They're a little vaguer now, but but you know what it means. When you're in love, baby, you are in love and you are ready, and that is your whole reason for being. You get a job just so that you can buy presents and have money for the gas to go to the movies and go out on dates, and you're just in love and you're happy, and all of a sudden you get dumped. And your goddess has dumped you. And now you have no God. Now what you gonna do? Oh yeah, eventually you get over it. But hopefully not by replacing one false god for another idol. And that's why Jesus was commending that widow to us, because she kept it simple and to the point. She believed that God loved her and would provide for her by his grace. Matter of trust. Just one thing. Is there any place that you know, or has anybody ever said about Jesus, man, he sure missed out on a lot? No, I'm serious. As a man, precisely what did he miss out on? I mean, he lived, he loved, he cared. All of the spiritual gifts were present in his life. Not a thing did he miss. And that is part of what he's pointing out to about that widow. She too has not missed out on all of the important things that make her a fully functioning human being. The good news for you and for I is that that is the gift we have been given by faith. And faith, of course, is a matter of trust. And also trusting that God has surrounded us with a group of people who are of a like-minded thought. That God is present and provides for us. Now, let me close with just 3 quick observations, kind of going to pick up on it next week. There's been essentially 3 kinds of Christians in every congregation that people will respond to in one way or another. The first one, and I don't know, you have to decide for yourself what style of Christian faith you live. One kind is a pilgrim, one who is a good traveling companion. That means you're conversational. You'll talk with people all the time. You'll help them to seek meaning and purpose in life. You'll have I have people come up to me all the time, and I know all you young people do too. You have friends that come up and say, my life really stinks. I hate my life. You ever hear that? Yeah, I know you do. Yeah. I hate my life. Well, they're right. They do hate their life. And if they have come to you and said, I hate my life, you have become a pilgrim, a fellow traveler with them. And they trust you for guidance, to help them to find a way to live. The second style is an activist, one who practices one of the 7 cardinal virtues, justice and fairness. What's fair in the circumstance in which you find yourself? One who is active in the faith is one who practices the deeds of Jesus and tries to emulate him. And the third kind is the artist. And I know all the art classes and music classes get cut back in the budgets in the school, etc., ad nauseum, which is really, we're a bunch of fools for allowing that, because that's what adds to the essential development of humanity in us and the exploration of humanity through poetry and prose and music. But the artists are the people who speak to the human condition, who can say and paint the portrait of what it means to be fully human, and also what it means to be diminished. All of us are one of those. And that's what makes us all so valuable and important to each other. Because we help to support and undergird and underpin and explore the faith that we share, each in our different ways. The widow who threw in a couple of pennies, in and of itself, nothing. But in its own integrity, that's what Jesus was pointing to. She lived her faith and trusted God and trusted her community of faith, even though the scribes, as Jesus pointed out, were thoroughly untrustworthy. There were others in the community who were not. So I would commend the widow to you and also commend to you to discover what you are: pilgrim, activist, or artist.